How many nights can a person sleep without truly resting? She woke up more tired than when she'd gone to bed. The doctors spoke of stress, vitamin deficiency, too much screen time. But there was something deeper, something quieter, that no test could detect. A weight in her chest that wasn't physical. It was the soul, tired not from doing but from waiting. Waiting for a return that never came. A sign, a gesture, an answer life had silently promised and quietly withheld. Her body still moved. She went to work, bought bread, replied to messages, but inside something dragged. Like a river that kept going by inertia, without current, without shore. She smiled out of habit, listened out of politeness, but what she really wanted was to lie down on the cold floor and let the world pass over her without demanding an explanation. The tiredness wasn't from effort, it was from being strong, from being steady, from being the one who holds everything because she always has. There was an empty bench by the sea where she sometimes sat when the world got too heavy. And there, in the wind that asked nothing of her, she understood. What hurt wasn't the present. It was the accumulation of what never happened. The conversations that never came, the hugs postponed, the silent promises she believed with childlike faith that remained suspended in time like balloons stuck to the ceiling of her soul. Waiting is more exhausting than striving. Because striving has direction, motion, achievement. Waiting is still, stagnant, endless. And she no longer knew whether she was waiting for someone else or simply for herself. But she waited. And waiting too long makes even the soul grow weary. That morning the body rose, but the soul stayed behind, sitting at the edge of the bed, eyes low, hands empty. She learned early on how to wait without showing it. She waited in the pauses between questions, in the seconds before a notification lit up, in the eyes that turned away when she tried to be heard. No one ever told her to wait, but she waited. Because that's what you do when you want love without asking, when you need care without disrupting, when you hope to be chosen without making a sound. The exhaustion came slowly. First in mornings that took longer to begin, then in words that wouldn't come out. And finally, in the will to do things, dissolving like sugar in water, too sweet to stay whole. She still did everything she was supposed to, but the soul had already left the room. Only the body remained. Muscle, memory, repeated gestures performed by someone who no longer knew why. There is something heavier than lack, and that is the almost. Almost loved in the right way. Almost seen when she needed it most. Almost said what she held inside, but time or courage or space ran out. And that almost, repeated over years, becomes ancestral fatigue. An invisible inheritance passed down like a family heirloom. The tiredness of waiting without even knowing what for. People told her to rest, take a break, sleep more, do something light. But no one understood that the rest she needed wasn't physical. She needed the world for just a moment to stop asking things of her. She needed someone to say, "You don't have to be strong now, I see you." But that never came. And so she carried on, the body awake, the soul curled up somewhere in the dark. There was a place inside her where love had never arrived. Not love from others, not even her own. A dry space built from postponed promises, interrupted gestures, and waits that aged in silence. It was like a locked room, dusty furniture under sheets, a crooked frame on the wall. That's where the things that never happened lived, the conversations that didn't occur, the embraces withheld, the attention that dissolved before it reached her. And right there, in the center of her chest, that place kept growing. It didn't hurt all the time, only when the world fell quiet. At the end of the day, when tasks faded and no voices remained to distract her, the absence flowed back in like a tide. And every absence had a name, even if unspoken, even if forgotten. She could recognize them by the weight they left in her body. Tight shoulders, a locked jaw, an old knot between the ribs. And then came the hardest thought of all. What if what she's waiting for never comes? What if no one ever notices this kind of tiredness? What if her soul, after all this waiting, is truly alone in that room? That was the moment when the body yawned. Not from sleep, but from giving up. Still, every morning she got up. She dressed. She replied with kindness. She smiled at the bakery cashier. But if someone really looked, they'd see. The smile didn't rise from her face, it was pushed outward from a force that had nearly run out. It was the smile of someone who learned to be kind, so her pain wouldn't disturb anyone else. And so she continued, with a tired soul, with a heart sitting on the side of the road, waiting for something that may never have existed, but she still called it love. That windless afternoon, she came home earlier than usual, not because she had finished everything, but because she couldn't keep pretending she could. She left her shoes by the door, dropped her keys on the table, and for the first time in years, didn't try to fill the silence. She didn't turn on the lights, didn't play music, didn't seek distraction. She let the emptiness take the room like an old animal that had always lived there, but she'd refused to see. She walked slowly through the hallway like a guest in her own home. She touched the walls, felt the dust along the furniture, and listened to her tiredness echo on the wooden floor. There was no visible pain, only absence. A presence so thick it could be touched. And then, without drama, she lay down on the floor. It wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't collapse. It was truth. Lying on the floor because the body could no longer hold the masks. Lying on the floor because the soul finally asked to rest. Lying on the floor because only there could the world stop asking her to be whole. Face toward the ceiling, she realized something quietly. No one had ever asked what she was tired of. Everyone expected her strength, her gentleness, her steadiness. But no one saw what it cost to carry it all. And on that cold floor for the first time, she saw herself with her own eyes. She didn't want to get up. And maybe she didn't need to. Not yet. Because before continuing, some part of her needed to stop. Stop with truth. Stop with soul. Stop with dignity. Time, somewhere on the other side of the house, listened in silence. As if to say, now yes. Now you are here. The floor did not ask questions. It didn't demand answers or expect her to bounce back. It didn't speak of deadlines or posture or reasons. It simply received her. It held her tiredness without flinching. And in that surrender, where no one required strength, she could finally be. Not the strong one, not the understanding one, not the one who always manages. Just a soul exhausted from pretending it wasn't. Silence changed too. It stopped being a threat. It became shelter. A silence that didn't pressure her to explain. A silence that said, you don't have to know. Just stay. And in that staying, something soft began to move, like warmth returning to a forgotten part of the body. She didn't cry loudly, but something inside her wept in stillness, a slow weeping, not of despair, but of release. She realized she had mistaken endurance for strength, that moving on wasn't always healing. Sometimes it was just fear of stopping. That applause for holding it together could also be a prison. There, between the cold floor and the open ceiling, something ancient stirred. A memory surfaced, herself as a child sitting on the steps waiting for someone to come for her. Looking at the door, waiting for care, waiting to be chosen. But no one came. So she learned to stand up alone. And never stopped. Until now. Now the tired body didn't want to rise out of habit. The soul wanted to be carried. Not by someone else, but by herself. Carried with grace, with listening, with rest. Carried not as a burden, but as something finally worthy. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she didn't long to be elsewhere. There, on the floor, she simply was, and that was enough. The next morning, the light entered gently through the window, not as a demand, but a permission. She was still lying on the floor, wrapped in a blanket she didn't remember reaching for. Outside, the world resumed its rush. But inside that room, time had softened into something sacred. Not stuck, not lost, just still. and beside her something unexpected, a small seashell, a child's keepsake. Forgotten, dusty, delicate. She didn't remember putting it there, but the shell sat silently by her side, intact and shimmering with memory. She picked it up and held it to her ear, like she once did in another life. And it wasn't the sea she heard, it was herself. A sound deep and distant, like something buried speaking at last. The shell echoed not with waves, but with waiting. A soul's waiting. A language of all the times she had silenced her truth. She understood, without needing to think. The soul remembers everything the body tries to forget, and this tiredness she carried wasn't recent. It was layered, made of every time she'd swallowed her voice, quieted her need, smiled through ache. Made of years spent being the peaceful one, the dependable one, the one who didn't ask. But peace without presence isn't rest. It's exile. She pressed the shell to her heart, not for answers, but as a gesture of reunion, as if saying, "I hear you now." And in that moment, something aligned. She was no longer trying to return to who she had been. She was learning to honor who she had become. After everything, the floor that once felt like an end now felt like a beginning. She didn't search for strength. She searched for softness. And somehow that was stronger than anything she'd ever known. That day she didn't return to her routine the way she used to. She moved slowly, not out of weakness, but reverence. She brushed her hair like someone tending to something sacred. She brewed coffee without noise, listening to the sound of boiling water as if it were a prayer with no need for words. Everything around her was the same: the room, the cup, the morning. But inside, something had shifted. She no longer waited for someone to notice her absence, nor for the world to pause and finally see her. She was now the one who saw herself, not completely, not perfectly, but enough. The tiredness had not vanished, but it had changed its shape. It was no longer a curse. It had become a companion, one who had walked with her for years without being acknowledged. A witness to all the nights she stayed strong without rest, all the days she showed up while hollow, all the times she whispered, "I'm fine," when she wasn't. And now, by honoring the tiredness, she wasn't surrendering to it. She was dignifying it. She sat on the porch with the shell beside her. She didn't need to listen to it again. She had finally heard herself, and in that ordinary, wordless moment, as the wind moved softly through the leaves and nothing else happened, she understood. The opposite of exhaustion is not energy. It's presence. The kind that arrives when you stop waiting to be rescued and simply decide to remain. If you found this story, perhaps your soul is also tired of waiting alone. Perhaps the floor beneath you is already ready to hold you. Perhaps it's not time to act, but to lie down, with courage. Close your eyes. Let your soul lie in your chest. Breathe slowly. Sometimes rest is the only thing missing to remember who you are.